Hi Richard, thanks for joining me today. We're going to have a little chat and sort of hear your perspective as a former electrician and now working at Electrical Safety First. So yeah, feel free to sort of tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do here.
Good afternoon, Alice. Nice to see you. Yeah, so my kind of journey into the electrical industry was way back in 1991. I kind of didn't really know. Well, I did know what I wanted to do after school, but I wasn't 100% sure. Ideally, I wanted to be a mechanic because of my love of Formula One over the years and cars and bits and pieces like that. And kind of went to the college to see what kind of courses were available. And then unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe you may look at it, my dad got involved. My dad being a plumber, stroke gas engineer, said that there was no way I was going to be a mechanic because you'd have dirty fingernails for the rest of your life, and it was hard graft and all the rest of it. And he pointed me towards the engineering route, stroke, electrical, electronics type route. So I went for an interview at my local college and had to undertake a simple maths test and a kind of English test. But with that, we also had to do like a bit of a practical test as to whether we could use some basic hand tools and kind of steps and things like that. And I kind of enrolled then onto the electrical installation course, and an apprenticeship became available with a local contractor. And at the time, there wasn't that many apprenticeships that were kind of available, and I didn't really know much about what an apprenticeship was, what it entailed. All I knew was that as long as you attended college to get the theory side of things, and then you'd be on site with other electricians, etc., that you'd actually get paid. And I thought, wow, that sounds pretty good. So I'm actually getting paid to go to work, whereas a lot of my friends from school kind of went into further education, maybe degrees and universities and other things. But I thought this was a good way to earn and learn at the same time. So yeah, my 4-year apprenticeship started in 1991.
Yeah, it's just interesting to hear like how you kind of got into it. And I guess you've kind of already answered like one of my first questions, which was what inspired you to pursue this career. You kind of touched on what your dad sort of influenced you. I guess you sort of already shared your journey into electrical engineering, but was there anything specifically that inspired you, or do you think it was just a kind of combination of things?
The one thing that really attracted me to was the practical side of it, because I was always kind of taking things apart, putting things back together. I was in the garage with my dad's tools and doing bits and pieces. But I remember going on a couple of sites with him way back in the day as well, and just getting involved with some of the work that he was doing. But then I had a keen interest in some of the other trades, especially the electricians, thinking, I wonder what they're doing with them cables and them wires and where they're going, and it was just a keen interest in how things worked. Yeah. And at school I quite liked electronics as well, and in terms of how things work that you might use at home, whether it be a games console or your TV and things like that. So I did have an interest in physics and science, and that kind of led me into electrons and electricity and obviously the dangers that come with it. And it kind of helped in the fact that when I started that apprenticeship, we were on a block release basis, which meant that we'd do a month at college, and then we do 3 months out on site, and then we go back to college and do a month. So I thought, well, it's not all bad, because I'm not going to be sat in a classroom, for another 2 or 3 years. I'm going to be doing a bit in the classroom, undertaking all the knowledge side of it, and then getting back on site, and then getting involved with real jobs, actually being out there doing a bit, and then taking that back to college and vice versa. So I was quite interested in that. I think if it had been another 2 years just sitting in a classroom, I don't think that I would have gone for it. And the fact that back then, my first year, it was £1.03 an hour. That was a whole, for 35, 40 pounds a week. I thought, well, that's all right. And way back in the 90s, of course, you got a lot more for your money. But there was that bit of an inspiration as well, where you were actually getting paid for learning. So I did enjoy that. Also, of course, of my love of gadgets and tools, I got to have my own toolkit, which was nice. Yeah. And the company I worked for in my first year, they had a scheme where that they would contribute so much towards your toolkit and you saved a little bit out your wages. So it kind of learnt me a lot of life skills at the same time, where you've got to realise that you've got to save a bit as well to be able to get what you want. So yeah, that's kind of what got me into it and kept me going, I think, for quite a while.
Once you got into it, your first job, how do you think that experience kind of shaped your understanding of electrical safety?
When you start your journey into the industry, you're bombarded with information, whether it be from a technical perspective, a safety perspective, a life skills perspective, all sorts of stuff coming at you. And I think certainly at college, they will teach you the correct way to do things in the safe way, and to be aware of the dangers that electricity can bring, whether it be working with it, using it, everything that's around you in day-to-day life. But then, of course, being on site, you find that a lot of people, due to they don't care or they haven't got time and all the rest of it, bad habits are introduced. So rather than following the safe isolation procedure, which is something that we constantly push towards, and having a method statement and a risk assessment process in place, safe systems of work, you find that those kind of go to pot on site. And when you get back to college, of course, those are drummed into you from day one, a bit like putting your seatbelt on. It's something that you get used to doing, like brushing your teeth, etc. But on site, you find that people are a little bit lax, and these things don't really take place, and consequently this is where we get accidents and injuries and sometimes fatalities. I was quite lucky because I was put with an old school electrician when I was doing my apprenticeship, and he had the time and he took the time to show me things and learn me things and get things that were drummed into me from day one. You must do this, you must do that, etc., etc. So I was quite lucky. But then certainly when I was back at college on my block release, there were other learners within the class that were a bit lax because they just either didn't care or they weren't showed the right way on site. And because of, I always had that drummed into me from my early stages in my apprenticeship. As I went and qualified in 1995, and a number of years after that, I started I set my own company up. Those ways of working and those morals and working safely was critical in everything that was within my own company. And over a number of years, I've had my own apprentices that have worked for me and other adult learners that have come and got some experience on site. So I'm quite lucky in the fact that they were always embedded into me. So therefore, they were embedded into the way I work and the way that my company worked. And of course, that's no less important then than what it is today, probably more important today. But back then didn't have the internet as you've got it now. You didn't have the free resources that are freely available, like our best practice guides, etc. And all the little videos that are out there, whether it be TikTok or Instagram, and other guidance that's freely available. You don't have to pay for it. It's there, and it's there in many formats, because obviously people learn in different ways. Back in my day, it was simply books and notes that you'd made. You couldn't go onto the internet and go onto our website, for instance, and have a look at a best practice guide, or ask a question via inquiries or anything like that. But none of that was available. It was only books and notes. That was it.
Yeah.
So
I guess things are a lot more accessible now, and getting more accessible.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think the power that we have within our guides is that they're not solely put together by ourselves. It's not what I think or what David thinks or Luke or Martin. What we put together is reached by consensus of many of the key organisations and key players within the industry. We all come together and come to those conclusions by consensus. So it's not what I think, it's not what NIC, EIC think, and that's industry guidance. And I think industry needs that, rather than one person's view or this person's view or that organisation's view. We've all come together to produce best practice, and of course it's free. So I wish I had that way back when,
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's really great. And I guess as a separate question to that, kind of following on from what you spoke about, your career journey from an apprentice to an electrician, but going one step further in your career, what motivated you to transition from being an electrician then teaching, because we haven't really mentioned, I guess, that you taught in colleges. I'll let you speak about that. But what kind of then what made you want to transition? I guess the first transition was electrician to teaching in a college. That transition from teaching to electrical safety first. So what kind of motivated you or made you think, oh, maybe I should go and do that?
I've always tried to expand my knowledge and better myself in any way that I can, just in my life in general. And I think it got to a point when I was running my own company, and I'd been running it for a number of years. When you work for yourself, of course, you don't get holiday pay, you don't get sick pay. I'd got numerous invoices that were due at wholesalers. I'd had a couple of lads that were working for me. And it became really difficult then. And then you start to question yourself whether it's all worth it, and then it puts pressure on your home life and your family life and things like that. And it just become hard, and an opportunity came up at a college for a part-time lecturer, and with that you got the benefits of holiday pay and sick pay and a teacher's pension and things like that. But I saw it as an opportunity to continue passing on my knowledge that I gained from many years, and I was very lucky in my apprenticeship, as I said earlier, because that electrician really spent the time with me and showed me lots of stuff, made sure that I did various things and really looked after me. And I thought, well, having had a couple of apprentices, wouldn't that be nice to pass that knowledge on, good working practices, and try and embed some of this stuff into some of these young generation that are trying to get into industry and try and promote how good an apprenticeship can be. And if they're full-time learners, then you really need to try and get yourself an apprenticeship and work hard and go for that. So this opportunity came up part-time. And I took that opportunity. It was quite an interesting interview process, whereby I had to go and present a 15-minute micro-teach on putting a light in a loft via a PowerPoint presentation. And at this point, I'm a practical, hard-working electrician. I've never heard of PowerPoint. I'd never even heard of it. And I'd never presented in front of 20, 30 people on a subject in 15 minutes. So a lot of it was a bit of a Google, what's a micro-teach, what you need to do, etc. And PowerPoint never heard of. So I went to the interview without a PowerPoint because I didn't know what one was. But I thought, well, there's lots of things I can talk about in terms of putting a light in the loft, the health and safety aspects, and safe isolation and other bits and pieces. So put myself a load of notes. But what I did do is I took a load of different props with me, because I thought, well, if I've got, some PPE, so like a face mask and some paper overalls and a safe isolation kit and a padlock and a tester and a few other bits to lay out on the table, hopefully that would engage some of the learners that were in that class. And that actually went quite well. So the 15 minutes flew by, but I quite enjoyed that. I was nervous, but I quite enjoyed that. But then the second part of the interview was around safeguarding, and it was around professional what's the word I'm looking for, professional matters and other bits and pieces relating to stuff that I'd never heard of before, that you would have when you work within a college and things. So that bit was a bit more difficult, but consequently from that it went really well, and I got the job part-time. And then because of the influx of learners, they offered me a full-time post kind of 6 months later. So it meant that I could carry on running my own company part-time while I was working there part-time. And then eventually I wrapped that up to pursue that teaching career. And then within that, the opportunities opened up then to do my degree in teaching and some assessing awards, vocational assessing awards and quality assurance awards, which were really tough actually, because being a practical person, I'm not an academic person as such, so that was quite difficult. But I enjoyed the challenge, and I was really proud of myself to spend that 2 years doing that level 5 degree in teaching, and met some great people along the way, whole new experiences, and the graduation was fabulous when I got me hat and cloak and all that type of stuff. But you can never take these things away from you, and it was a real achievement, and I took that with me, moved away from that college, and kind of took over as a tutor manager at a local training provider, private training provider in Birmingham, where I looked after 8 or 9 lecturers that used to work for me. And I took over the apprenticeship framework when it just came out, which was like a trailblazer. So I had to design that qualification in terms of how it gets delivered. This job became available as a safety engineer within Electrical Safety First, and I'd used Electrical Safety First best practice guides for years and years, delivering testing courses, for instance, and things like that, because of the free resource and the fact that it's independent guidance. So I was aware of the work that they did, specifically on the installation side, but wasn't really aware of all the work that they do in terms of the product safety side. And it was explained to me that part of the role would be sitting on the subcommittees that put our wiring regulations together. And having used the regulations for years and years, because that's your basic minimum safety standard as an electrician. And when you open the book, there's a whole list of names of people that are involved with putting that book together. And to be part of that, or to have a better knowledge of how these committees come together to put the book together, would give you a better understanding of why some of the things are in there. So I thought to be part of that would be a real challenge for me, and to put together technical reports, deliver presentations to maybe the fire service, or indeed our own installation events.
Yeah, I guess that kind of leads me on to like my next question for you. Why do you think apprenticeships are a great way of sort of getting for young people to sort of start that career in electrical engineering or working as an electrician?
It gives you life skills, number one, because you're getting paid, then you've got to be there on time. You've got to go with the right PPE, the right tools, the right equipment. You've got to have the right attitude to work. Attitude's a massive part of your working day life. You've got to have the right attitude, and you've got to ask questions and learn things and accept when working practices aren't quite what they should be, and question whether that's safe to do that. And if you're not sure, there's plenty of resources that are out there now that have got some really, really good information that you can go and look at, and then present that and say, look, I don't know, John, I've seen this online. Are we really doing that the correct way? Is that the right way to do it? Should I have this piece of equipment before I do that job? Because I'm not safe doing it from, with this piece of equipment, or I've had no training on using that. I'm not happy to do that. Or equally, if you are happy to do it, you've done it before, I could do that. Can I wire those sockets? Can I connect those? Could you check that after me? You've got to have that bit of a passion in you to want to learn more. There's so many career paths now, where we talk about being an electrician. There's so many career paths from that you could end up doing all sorts of different types of installations, from smart home to everything to do with EV charging, or maybe battery storage, solar panels, commercial installations, domestic installations, industrial. There's so many different pathways, but ultimately you've got to have the right attitude, and you need your core understanding and core knowledge, as well as the practical side. That's the beauty about it, is not everyone's academic. People like to use the hands, but there is the theory side, which is as important as the practical.
It's National Apprenticeship Week, and we're sort of joining in with the various organisations that are raising awareness on how to kind of get into the industry, and so also celebrating those apprentices or aspiring apprentices to get into this career path. What advice, based on what you've told us so far, what advice would you give to someone starting an apprenticeship or sort of looking to start?
I think if you're not sure if an apprenticeship's the right career path that you want to go down, I'd definitely recommend that you visit a local college or one of the big training providers when they've got one of their open evenings on, where you can go and it's a bit like try before you buy, where you kind of get an overview of the course, the duration of the course, what's involved and what's expected of you, so you've got an idea of what it is you're going to be doing. Certainly when I worked in FE, and we had open evenings, people were didn't expect some of the things that you might have to do. For instance, you might have to work out of town for a period of time. You might have extended hours, maybe. You might have to work through the night. You are expected to be at college every day for a set period of time. You are expected to buy your own PPE, or your company might help you along with that. We spoke about tools, etc. And you are expected to do some of your own learning in your own time, similar to what we spoke about earlier in terms of, the CPD element to it, where we're always learning. And there's so many useful modules and bits and pieces that are available now on many websites, including ours, where you can pick up that extra little bit of knowledge and bit of learning. You've got to prove to your employer that you go the extra mile.
Yeah.
We spoke about this, but I've actually found this online and I've done a little bit more research. Do you know what I mean? If you've got an apprenticeship, as I say, all of the things that they expect from you, you've got to make sure that you're doing those things. You've got to listen to what people say. You've got to make sure that you're there on time. You've got to make sure you've got the right equipment, especially if you're at college. If you're at college, make sure you take your books, your notes, your pens, your scientific calculator. If you're in the workshop at the college, you take your safety boots and your overalls and all the rest of it. You've got to make sure you're there. Don't book holidays when you're supposed to be at college unless you really have to. And have the right attitude to learning. You've got to have the right attitude, because otherwise you ain't going to end up far. That's the problem you've got with it. Document your journey as well. I'd try and say promote your journey. And when we're looking at, really promoting apprenticeship weeks and the learner of the year, apprentice of the year, what makes you better than anybody else? What are you doing different? And if you're proud of something you've done on site, or indeed in the college workshop, you've clipped a bit of cable, you've connected something and you've tested it and it works, document it a bit, create your own little story. Social media can be a very toxic place to try and promote yourself, but you've got to try and take no notice of that and be proud of what you've achieved. I always recommend it to my learners, especially if they were looking for an apprenticeship, that what makes you stand out to an employer than somebody else? Well, this is the work I've done. This is my understanding of it. I did this test because this proved this. The regs say this. It just shows a bit of passion, a bit of ambition, and a bit of understanding.
I really like that one. Yeah, especially with social media growing. Like, I've come across, obviously I'm not technical in my career, but I've come across so many sort of people doing really great jobs, to be honest, being really transparent with how they're learning on the job and things like that, and sharing their top tips. And obviously you have to take it with a pinch of salt sometimes, because unfortunately there are people who might be doing things unsafely, or they might not be registered electricians, but I think it's kind of a bit more encouraging now that there's younger people showing, and older people as well, all sorts of ages, showing their profession as an electrician, and there's almost like a nice community as well, part of it, because people are commenting sort of like, I've even seen like things on TikTok that's like, what's in your toolkit, what's in your tool bag, and then like it's just a really nice, it seems like it can be a really nice community on there, and it's great to document it because that's what employers are looking for. That's what, like you've done your teaching, and now you're working for a safety organisation, which is great. And I really like the idea of sort of documenting it and showing yourself as a professional, and sort of also whilst building community and probably making a lot of friends. A lot of my LinkedIn is sort of people who've gone to apprenticeship awards and all these great things. And it's just really refreshing to see such like a community. I
think sharing that knowledge, because that's what electricians are good at as well, is sharing knowledge. And listen, nobody knows everything, and I think if you can have a professional conversation about things, and then you've got to be prepared to listen to what other people say. At the end of the day, everyone's got their own opinion, but it's you're never too old to stop learning, and it's always nice to keep your ears open. And as we've said, there's lots of really good content around. Podcasts weren't a thing like 30 years ago, whatever it was. There's some really great podcasts. I'm a regular guest with Mark Allison from Apprentice 1-to-1, which is a great kind of movement that Mark started in COVID, actually, to support apprentices and learners that are maybe struggling out there with getting an apprenticeship or a job, or indeed they're doing some theory on a particular subject, design for instance, and they're struggling a little bit, need a bit of extra help. I've done a number of podcasts with Mark where we've tried to break down the design process, from an electrician's point as a designer. These are the steps you need to take, and loads of that stuff. We do loads of really good bits and pieces. I know Mark's doing quite a bit of work dropping off free materials and free equipment at local colleges to try and help the departments, because working in FE myself for a number of years, the budgets are quite tight on equipment, and you're expecting these apprentices to do a really good job in the workshop, but yet the tools are pretty rubbish and the materials aren't very good. And I know that we've got involved as an organisation with that, where we've supplied some safe isolation kits, and we've done a number of college visits last year, myself and Dave, where we've been and spoke to some of the learners, adult learners, full-timers, apprentices.
From your experience, tell us your most important safety practices that you think every aspiring electrician should know. It could be like very specific and niche, but something you just always think is the top of your list. I think, imagine sort of like a checklist.
The first thing I consider before doing any work activity is it necessary? In other words, I've got to install some new floodlights up on the back of the house. So is it necessary that I need to use a ladder to be able to do that work? If it is necessary, then am I making sure that the equipment I'm going to use, the ladders, whatever it is fit for purpose, safe, been inspected before I used it? And am I confident and competent to be able to use that access equipment safely? That's number one. Do I have the right training myself and experience and knowledge to be able to do that job? Do I have a risk assessment in place and a safe system of work? You've got to think about, do you have the right or sufficient knowledge and competence to do the job? Do you have the right equipment to do the job? And ultimately, is it really necessary? Could you say to the customer that maybe they'd be better at lower level, so therefore I don't have to use a ladder? It's all part of a risk-based approach to doing any type of work. Then you could talk about working on equipment that's live or potentially live. We know that the Electricity at Work regulations does not allow working on live equipment, but if we do, because it's absolutely necessary, for instance, doing some live testing. Can't do live testing dead, obviously. Do you have the sufficient knowledge, competence and experience to be doing that type of work? Do you have the right equipment? Does the equipment comply with the relevant standard? And in this case, it would be GS38. Get your equipment out, make sure that it's working correctly. You check the requirements of GS38 before you start using the equipment. Do you have the right signs, knowledge, information? Have you relayed that information to the people that are working around you? Are you aware of any other work practices that are going on around you? Just really think about what you're doing before you do it. So as an electrician, if you've got other trainees or apprentices that are working with you, alongside you, in other words, you are supervising them as such, then, you've not only got to consider your own safe working practices, you've got to translate that information to that apprentice, trainee, learner, etc. Just like I was back in the day, that it was drummed into me that before we do any task, we make sure that we've got all the correct equipment to do the task. We know fully what it is that we're doing. We've carried out any risk assessments, etc. So we can do that task safely. If you don't quite have the knowledge at that time or the correct training, you refuse to do that particular work. And if you're the electrician guiding the apprentice or the learner, that you're taking your time to demonstrate and show them how to do the work safely. So you've got to not only consider yourself, if you've got apprentices or learners, you've got to take the time to make sure that you pass that information and knowledge on to them. Are
there any sort of memorable short stories or success stories, I quite like memories because it could be anything. Are there any sort of memories that you have from your time as teaching or mentoring apprentices that you'd like to share?
A couple that stand out. One specifically was when I first got into teaching, and you're nervous, aren't you? Not sure what to expect, etc. And when I got my first teaching job, the part-time job, When I turned up at the college to start my first day, the first person I got introduced to was Mr. Gary Hayes. And if anyone that knows, Gary obviously looks after the apprenticeship side of eFix, but also has got his own YouTube channel, GSH Electrical. And I'd never met the chap before, and I'm waiting there in my van, because I still had my van then when I started teaching in the car park. And I remember this chap came like bowling over to the van. All right, mate, how you doing? Yeah, I'm Gary. I've got my level 2s in this morning. Brilliant. So of course I'd never taught before, so I wasn't aware of what was going on. Went up to the classroom, and all these learners from his class were all lined up outside the classroom, which I thought was quite strange at the time. And he knew each of their names individually, and he told them where to sit in the room. So they didn't decide where to sit. He told them exactly where to sit. And then straight away, it was like a whirlwind. I was like, oh, he was like asking them questions, what was that? And at the time, I didn't really kind of understand why he was doing what he was doing, if that makes sense. And from then on, he was kind of my mentor in terms of building up towards my teaching qualifications and everything. And he's incredible in the way that he passes on his knowledge, and he actually inspired me to do half of the things that he does when he delivers knowledge and teaches, and just the way that he controls the classroom, the way that he manages the classroom and controls it. And we still remain good friends today, share lots of knowledge, and the things that he does for industry and still does is inspirational, and that keeps me going. And we share knowledge, and and he does his college connections and things like that, which we're hoping to get involved in. We did a little bit last year. So that's one really key memory in terms of myself and my journey and how he inspired me to do what I do. And then just seeing some of the learners that I'd taught over the years, from not being able to use basic hand tools at all. So you go in the workshop, you get hand tools out, screwdrivers, general hand tools and things. And you forget that when I was growing up, that was around me, because I was taking my own bike apart and stuff like that. But whereas they, the only thing they were, or the only thing they could use was a PlayStation controller, brilliant on a phone, but yet you ask them to use a simple tool like a screwdriver, even a tape measure, to be able to set a job out, use a drill, hand tools and that, and to see them develop their hand skills and knowledge of tools and what tools are for, and how they're an essential part of being an electrician, was really enjoyable. And seeing them from one year into the next year and actually put together, quality of the work was outstanding. There was none of this, well, that'll do, you know what I mean? And you try and say to them, well, imagine you're the customer, you paid an electrician, come and install that job. How would you feel if you looked at that job and you paid money for it? Would you be happy with that job? Most of them, you'd always find a little bit of something, but the whole point was that by the end of their journey, they were so critical about the quality of the work that they did, whether it be even simple things that it being straight and level, and they just took pride in the work. And I thought, well, that hasn't come from anyone but me. Pride in the work and doing a quality job has come from me. And seeing that journey throughout, the time as an apprentice, and then coming back with really good news that not only had they done really well in the theory side of it with their exams and things, but all the practical tests that they had to do as part of their apprenticeship, they'd passed and done really well. But those are two that really kind of stand out,
Yeah, that must be really rewarding, and just knowing that you've helped them in that way. And also, you talking about how your mentor inspired you, well, they're probably thinking the same with their mentor, and that's also really nice. Whether they mention it to you or not, you've played a big part in their career journey, and as an apprentice, that's really good. I'll ask one more question now,
Sorry.
And you can, so I guess talk to me as if I were an apprentice, unsure about whether to go into the industry. I'm sort of split between, do I want to train as an electrician and do all of my qualifications and work as an apprentice? What message would you like to share with young people who perhaps aren't sure about starting a career in the electrical industry?
Have you ever thought about when you go home after school or college, and you plug your phone in and it charges, or you switch your PlayStation on, or you put your lights on, or you go and switch the shower and have a nice hot shower. How it all works, who's responsible for that, who puts that in, who designs that, who puts it all together, and who makes sure ultimately that it's safe, and beyond that, where you may have smart features within your home where you can control lighting via an app on your phone, all that type of stuff. That's a career that requires electricians, to be able to do that work, but to be able to do it safely. So it's not the same as other construction trades, because ultimately we're dealing with something that you can't smell, you can't see, you can't hear it, but you can certainly feel it, and it's got the power to be able to cause a fatality or injure someone. So with that becomes a huge responsibility when dealing with electricity. So it's a really rewarding career, but it's not all theory. A lot of it is the practical element to doing it. So if you like to do practical things and you don't want to be stuck behind a desk all day, etc., then a career in the electrical industry is a great career path. But equally, if you do like to get involved with design and create drawings and plan and work with other professionals like architects and things, the electrical industry is still a great career path to be in, because everyone needs a designer. The installers go out and install it, and then you might have an electrician that's more suited to the inspection and testing and verification. Somebody needs to go and make sure that what's been installed is actually safe to use and it's compliant with the current version of the regulations. So it's a very wide and varied industry and career, but a fantastic career, because you're always going to need an electrician, and the more we move into an electrified world, of course, that's going to increase. And I know that generally, nationally, there's a big shortage of electricians, so there's a big drive to try and get people into the industry, and the apprenticeship is a great way to get in, because, as I've said earlier, you are actually earning while you're learning, which is so important. But you've got to commit to it, because there's a lot of work involved, but there's plenty of guidance and help out to get you through. But I would go back and think when my dad said, you don't want to be a mechanic really, because having dirty fingernails. We still have that conversation all the time, and I'd still love to be a mechanic, but I wouldn't change a thing, because I've had lots of different kind of doors that have opened, luckily, in my career. And I think sometimes you create your own opportunities if you do the right thing, say the right thing, and promote yourself certainly on some social media platforms now. People, you get recognised, and you just get a chance to build on your experiences and career, and you just keep learning. Every day is a learning journey. But the electrical industry, is a good career to be in, but there's a lot involved. But definitely go and try before you buy if you can.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. It's great to sort of raise awareness of all of this during National Apprenticeship Week. So thank you.
No problem.